right, brothers, it's my honor to welcome and introduce a man who has been at the forefront of one of our most needed and courageous ministries in our Orthodox Christian faith, the St. Paisios Brotherhood. And I'd like to briefly speak to the work that they're doing for the salvation of men. The St. Paisios Brotherhood is a fellowship of Orthodox Christian men committed to the pursuit of sexual integrity, purity of heart, and genuine brotherly accountability. In an age where isolation, addiction, shame, and secret struggle have become so common among men, the St. Paisios Brotherhood exists as a lifeline, a place where no man has to walk alone, and no man is left to fight his battles in the dark. Their mission is simple, but it is spiritually profound, to bring men into the light, into confession, into healing, into support, and into the real transformation in Christ. Under the leadership of their president, Gary Metz, the Brotherhood has developed safe and confidential groups where men can speak honest and without judgment, teaching and pastoral guidance rooted in the church and the fathers, a pattern of repentance strengthened by brotherly presence, prayer, and accountability, a culture where victory is not measured in perfection, but in persistence, progress, and faithfulness. Both he and the St. Paisios Brotherhood models what we have been talking about these last couple of days. That brotherhood as a path to salvation, one man helping another man work out their salvation in Christ. Brothers, please join me in welcoming our friend and fellow laborer and a true brother in Christ, Gary Metz.
Well, it's a pleasure being here with you guys tonight. I'm going to probably be a little more practical tonight as well. We heard some great teaching, and a lot of my favorite sayings were all being said by these other priests. But it's very good anyhow. It's really nice being here. I wanted to be at the last one you were at, and I just love the kind of work you're doing just generally. For those of you who don't know much about the Brotherhood, which is probably most of you, although we do have guys in the audience here who have definitely been part of our program, although I'm not seeing. Well, you have, yes, you have, and then okay, we got a few. There's some more that may show up in the meeting later on. Anyhow, I just wanted to say a couple things about how we differentiate ourselves a little bit from, before I get started, with Amen itself. Because we love Amen. I think Amen is an awesome operation. There's a really great need in all the jurisdictions in America for men to have a good, safe place for them to go and meet other guys in their communities. And so that we definitely support that. And just having good relationship with our men is just really powerful. What makes us different, however, with the Brotherhood is we're trying to help you, those men who know that there's more that they could be doing in their lives, that they could have a deeper relationship with God, that they see that there's areas of their lives where they'd like to see themselves transform more quickly than maybe they were doing just by sitting in a pew. Those men who have that kind of sense, that angst, that they want more, it's a good place for you. And so what we try to do is, because we live in we're Americans, okay? We're secular materialists, okay? We don't really think, and we don't certainly act like first century Christians did. They saw the world very differently. They believed that there was God or gods, there were spirits, there were things that were actually happening around them all the time. They understood that. We're just beginning to understand that in our modern world as we're beginning to watch the secular materialism worldview begin to collapse. So you're part of that. You see that there was some reason why things are changing and you needed to find a place, a home, and you found it. You came into Orthodoxy. But we're still carrying a lot of baggage. And one of the things about men is that, we're basically habitual creatures. A father was talking earlier tonight. I won't say which father, but one of the fathers was saying earlier tonight that he can do the liturgy automatically without actually participating in it in his heart at the moment, because his mind's going some other place. Well, we all do that all the time. So how do we make room for God to actually be part of our lives? Because we're actually thinking still like secular men. And one of the things we're trying to do at the Brotherhood is help us to become like Orthodox men have always been. Take on the kind of life, the way of living, the way of seeing the world, the way they interact with other people. That's what we're really trying to help encourage, to cultivate in our lives as men. And I'll tell you, we need it because our world has big problems. And that's part of the reason why so many men are coming to Orthodoxy right now. They recognize there's something not right in our culture. There's something that's out of whack, and we need stability. We need something that actually has some foundation to it. And Orthodoxy, God, we're so fortunate with Orthodoxy that we have that. It's a very rich, a very deep type of relationship with God. So, but the part of the problem is that our modern men, though, like I said, because we're secular materialists, not only do we not know we need to change much, but we think when we recognize that we have needs to change in some areas, we think we're incapable of doing so. It's like, it's just the way I am. Okay, I've been this way forever and ever and ever and ever. And they just don't have hope for a real change and how they can live their lives. And we're about interrupting that kind of thinking. Because it's a lie. And so what we're doing to try to help support that is we believe, first of all, fundamentally in brotherhood. A man needs a brother. We all need someone else who knows us well, who can see what we are not seeing about ourselves. Sometimes that could help us in many different ways, okay? Or things where we're hurting ourselves and we don't realize it. But we need other eyes. And I'll tell you, if you got to know me very long, Father could do this for me, but because he knows me pretty well. But we all are blind to our own stuff, and people who know us well, they can see immediately what, if you just did this one thing, Gary, your life would be so much better, right? We all need men who can speak into our life like that. And that's why we have a brotherhood, so we can begin to build trusting relationships, that supportive relationships with men who are serious about their faith and really want to become the men that God's called us to be. In Orthodoxy, we have this kind of strange dichotomy, and I like the fact it was talked about a little bit earlier tonight, and that's that we either think of ourselves as, like when we were Protestants, most of us were Protestants here, for those of us who were, we thought, okay, we're like the sons of God. I'm all good and ready to go. Okay, God, just take me when you're ready. I'm as good as I'm going to get, because you're going to make me better when I get over there on the other side. Okay, that's how the Protestants think. Okay, as Orthodox, there's a truth that's said there. We are sons of God, but we're not living it yet. We're not actually experiencing that. Instead, in Orthodoxy, we usually emphasize, I'm a sinner. Not only am I a sinner, I'm probably the worst of all sinners, right? Okay? And so we know how to do that, how to play that role as Orthodox. But the real reality is we're supposed to be actually living in the center of that. They were talking about that earlier today, that we need to live in this tension. We're not yet acting and living as sons of God. At the same time, we're no longer just as broken as we were, but we're certainly not healed and made strong like God's wanting us to become. There's much more he would like to heal in us to make us stronger and better men for ourselves, for our families, if we have families, certainly for our communities, our churches. He wants to heal us and make us strong men, and we can do this. And one of the ways that regular men, laymen like us, most of us are laymen here, in the past, for millennia, the way they did that is they started with some very simple, basic things. They started with a prayer rule. You go back thousands of years before Christ. They were doing prayer rules. Why were they doing it? Because it worked. It actually helps. Actually developing a relationship with the living God, actually talking to him regularly helps. Okay, it's like basic stuff. And it occurred to me recently when I'm talking to some of the guys about this issue that those of us who are married, you might be able to understand this even better. But if we were talking to our wives as often as we talk to God, we probably wouldn't be married very long. Our wives would have given up on us a long time ago. Now, fortunately, our God's not that way. He's pleased whenever we make any kind of movement towards him, because that's his whole desire. He's waiting for us to notice him and to start pursuing him. But we're so distracted by the modern world. We've been so habituated with how we use our time that to actually try to break open time to have a morning prayer rule or to have an evening prayer rule is very odd for most guys. In fact, it's like, I don't have time. I can't afford it, essentially, is what they're saying. I'm busy. I'm too busy with work. I'm too busy with my family. It's not important, is what they're really saying to themselves, though. Okay. And so they get the fruit of what that means. We all get that. We get the fruit of what we invest in and what we sacrifice for. And I'm just suggesting that for those men who would like to experience a different way of living their life, a different way to reframe and understand and see their lives and how it's actually working with us, come take a peek at the Brotherhood, because we're not just a friendly social club. We're going to challenge you to be the best man you can be, because our world needs it, you need it, your family needs it, people you work with need it. You're made for a time like this, and that's why you're even here. The fact that you're here tells me that he's preparing you for something much greater, but you do have the freedom to say no. And many of you might do, you probably will, but I'm going to encourage you to take the leap and check us out. Just at least check us out, okay? Because what we're doing is, I think, it is life changing. So I just wanted to encourage you to begin to see that. How do we do these things? Let me give you a couple little ideas of how we try to do some of this stuff. Father and I, this is a good time for bring Father up for a second. Father and I met about 8 years ago. I think it's about 10 years ago, whatever it was. I have an IT company. I was doing some websites. Father was at the time making some extra cash doing website development stuff himself. And so I invited him to come over and help me because he's Orthodox priest. That's pretty cool. Let's do it. But we'd get to talking and we'd start talking about men, because we both saw that God was raising up a new generation of men. And we were going, when is the Orthodox community going to do something to help support the Orthodox men? And so I'd like to have Father Hans come up for a second, if you wouldn't mind right now, and then give the story of what finally got you to jump on board with this. Okay. So this will give you a context as to why we have the St. Paisios Brotherhood.
So this all started for me when a young man came into my life. He was 19, and like so many other guys, he was in what I call a complete emotional lockdown. Okay? Porn, weed, the whole 9 yards. And he had a radical encounter with Christ. And it happened this way. His brother was in a very serious car accident. And I got the text in the morning. His mother texted me, Jeremiah has been in a very serious car accident. We're on our way to the hospital. And and I went to the hospital right away. In fact, I kind of beat the family. But the family came there, and Jeremiah was there on the gurney in the emergency room. They didn't even put him in a bed. I was unconscious. And you have to understand, I loved this kid. He was 23 at the time. All right? And he was the big brother. The family comes, and they're looking at me. What do we do? They're all looking at me. What are we going to do? And I said, this is a desperate time. But in desperate times, we pray to God. Remember my words. And we're going to ask him to save your brother. There's a whole family of brothers there. And so I said the prayer, the healing prayer. And in the prayer, it came to me, he's going to be okay. But I could not discern whether that was really the voice of God or that was me, because I did not want him to die. Instead, I made a vow to God at that point. I was going to do everything I can to fight as hard as I can that he might live. And so the prayers are done, and the little brother comes up to me and he says, Father, he's going to be okay. I said, you think so? He said, yeah, I think he's going to be okay. That was my confirmation. That was indeed God speaking to me. That's my confirmation. And I looked at his mother, who's a nurse, and understood the severity of these injuries. And I said, Patty, he might pull through this. So 2 days later, I talked to him, and I said, Cliff, tell me how you knew that he's going to be okay. And he said, I can never say this without tears coming to my eyes. I really cannot, because talk about going to the very center of the creation and seeing the cross. He said, I don't know, Father, but when you were praying, I told God, I can't say this. I told God, take my life instead of his. And this guy, remember, he was in complete lockdown, and he cried out to God, and he said, I don't know what happened, Father, but I was brought up to heaven, and I was brought back down. He opened his heart, and the opening of his heart for the love of his brother enabled God to reach in and show him he was real, and God was what he needed. And so I ended up catechizing him and baptizing him a year later. Now, Jeremiah, who was in a coma, was in the trauma ward of a nearby hospital, in the trauma unit. And I started praying, and the prayers were laborious. They were hard. But like I said, this sounds presumptuous, but it was in my heart. No, he's not dying. I'm not going to let him die. End of story. I'm just not going to let it happen. As if I had any real say over it. But I kind of did, I found out. Okay? And Jeremiah was the friend of Dimitri in Greece, who is the spiritual son of Elder Paisios, who was elder at the time. And Emily gave me the email he got, and I got in touch with Dimitri via email. I didn't know who he was. And he said, well, Elder Paisios has helped a lot of men in Greece who were in car accidents. And I wrote back, tell me what to do. And he told me what to do, and I did it. I didn't really know who Elder Paisios was. Okay? But it meant, there were no icons at the time, so he sent me a picture. I printed it out. I put the icon, the picture, I pinned it next to the bed on the side of the head that had the injury. He had taken off half his skull. And we prayed. And we prayed a lot. I went into the hospital almost every single day and prayed for him and anointed him. And he was in a coma for 3 months. The doctor who reattached the part of his skull told him, he said, 95% of the people with your injuries I never see again, meaning 95% of the people with his injuries die. And another doctor told me, he said, well, what he didn't tell you is the other 5% are institutionalized. So it was a big question when he came out of his coma, what he was going to be like. Now, one of the signs that a person might be on recovery is that when they come out of the coma with the traumatic brain injuries, that they can take commands. And I happened to be the first guy in. It took him 3 days for the sedation to clear his body. And I was one of the first guys in the room when he became coherent again, conscious. I was there with his mother. And I said, Jeremiah, give me a thumbs up. And he was lying in the bed. He heard my voice. I could see his head tilt to the door where I was. And he went like this. And I said, Jeremiah, make your cross. And I'll never forget this. Picks up his arm and makes his cross. All his mobility returned, by the way. All his mobility returned. I looked at his mom. His mom was there too. I said, Daddy, I think we're seeing a miracle. I think we're seeing a miracle. All right? Now, that was just dramatic events. How it plays into the brotherhood is this, is the little brother who encountered Christ was the first one who really approached me and said, you got to help me. You got to help me with this stuff. Okay, the porn and all that. And I learned how to do it. And then other men just started coming into my life randomly, here and there, and I helped them out. And then I got a call from a priest in Chicago. They were holding a conference called Restoring Patriarchy. He had heard Father Patrick Reardon, jewel of a man, absolute jewel of a man. I helped design that conference. They asked me to help him design. I helped him design that conference. And then he wanted me to speak because he had heard a little bit about what I was doing. So I designed a talk called Pastoring Young Men Back to Manhood. And I was the last speaker on a Friday night. And the next morning, the response I got to that talk overwhelmed me. It was so positive. And that's the first time I realized, oh, I've got something really powerful here. I didn't realize this. I didn't know. You know, I was even thinking, how am I going to present this to these people? But I did. And so what they did, they said, oh, this was the best talk of the conference. We're going to put it on our website. Means everything else was behind a paywall except that video. And that video took off on a slow viral, and guys just started calling me up from all over the country. And I would ask them, what was it about? And it was about the whole PMO problem. And I would ask them, well, what was it about that video that compelled you to call me? And every one of them gave me the same answer. When you said that this is really displaced creativity, it's displaced creativity, which is what it is. All right? And then what happened was, but with all these guys calling me, I was on the phone a lot. It got to be, I thought, this is never going to end. It's going to grow and grow and grow. And that's what was happening. Meanwhile, then a priest and a deacon came down and said, we want to talk to you. And they drove down to Fort Myers. We spent the afternoon talking. And they wanted me to start an organization. And I thought, you know, I've started a lot of stuff. And most of it doesn't go anywhere, but some of it takes off. But there's a common denominator between every one of them is it just takes a ton of work. It just takes a ton of work. And to start an organization, I thought, man, I don't know. It sounds good, but does the Lord in the end want me to do it? Is this something I should do? And so I put it off. And I said, well, I'm going to think and pray about this because I didn't know if it was a good idea. I knew it'd be a big commitment. Am I ready for that? And all that. Meanwhile, I was going to Greece. And I was going to Mount Athos because I have a monk friend on Mount Athos, and I got an invite there. So that also meant that I was going to go see Dimitri. Dimitri's story is great. There's a woman in the village. This is where Elder Paisios spent the last, I think, decade and a half, 2 decades of his life. He was older then. There's a woman in the village who could not carry a baby. She had like 5 miscarriages. Very devout and faithful woman. Elder Paisios got a call once, and she would always go to the monastery and worship there. Elder Paisios got a call once and said, "There's a baby for adoption. Do you know anybody who could, any family that would take him, the baby?" This is where they do adoptions in Greece. And he called up the woman, and she took the baby, and the baby was Dimitri. The baby was Dimitri. So Dimitri grew up from a little boy to about 25 years old under the stewardship of Elder Paisios. I mean, it's quite a story. And he calls him Papu. And Elder Paisios loved to chant. He wasn't a priest, but he loved to chant. So he would go and stand next to Elder Paisios during Vespers and the services of the church. And so this was my chance to meet Dimitri in person as well. And so I went with my wife and my daughter, but they did kind of their girl thing in Thessaloniki. They weren't that interested in visiting the monasteries. So a couple of days, Dimitri and we just went to different places and visited. And he's very well known in the area. He knows all the Yarandas and all that. We walk into one monastery, and I walk in there, and I could feel the elder read my soul. I could feel it. I said, "Oh, this man's looking into me, and he's reading me." But I let him do it. I just didn't resist. I could tell it happened real fast, but I did not resist. I just let him do it. And then he walks up to me. He was standing about where the door is. And then he walks up to me, and he says in Greek, real fast. This is the translation. He says, "You will lead many young men in America into the Orthodox Church, and Elder Paisios and the Theotokos are going before you." And I went, "Oh." Because he said that and went right through me. "Oh." I said, I got to start up this organization. Came back and I said, "We're starting it up." And that's the beginning of the St. Paisios Brotherhood. And Gary, I see Gary as a co-founder, right? Because we were talking about this long before all this happened. But this is why we started the Brotherhood. We got the message from on high, so to speak. We really did. And when you get a message like that, you have no choice but to obey it. And what we have discovered is we're learning as we go. But what we have discovered is God is blessing it. God is blessing it, and here we are. Here we are.
Thank you, Father. Appreciate it. So now you understand why we love St. Paisios so much.
Yeah, that's why we named it St. Paisios Brotherhood. That's where the name came from.
And in fact, he says something that's kind of interesting. We use a phrase that he came up with, St. Paisios. He says that this life is a boot camp. Okay. If you're a Protestant, you kind of think of this life as kind of like waiting for heavenly Disneyland. You know, it's kind of a stopover. We get to have some good times here, but that's it. But as Orthodox, we have a different understanding of what this life is all about. It's a boot camp. It's a training ground. And when they were talking earlier today about the struggles we have as men, the things that come to us. If we are not thinking as a secularist man, if a materialist man, if we think as an Orthodox man, all these difficult things that come at us, they're made to make us stronger and heal our souls. So every single problem that you're facing is a blessing and a gift from God. And once we begin to habituate understanding that is really what's going on, this is really the truth, and it's a good thing. God is wanting to reform your soul by bringing you difficult things such that you can become the man he's designed you to become. I mean, what's a better deal than that? So, because what it did for me when I began to really understand these things myself personally is I began to realize I have nothing to fear. There's nothing that can happen to me or to those around me because I'm going to grow through these experiences. God is with us. He will teach us what we need to do. And so on that point, I'll give you a practical thing that I like to teach the men a lot. This is one of those few practical things I'm going to give out tonight. They're like teasers, but we do this stuff in the Brotherhood. But it's every man knows the thing he's avoiding. If I were to, I won't do the raised hand thing. I've done that before, but when you raise, I would say this, that every single man here knows in his heart of hearts something he's been avoiding that God wants him to do. And he doesn't think he has the ability to do it. The cost is too great. There's some reason. We all have our reasons why we don't actually deal with the things that we know in our heart of hearts that we need to deal with. And what I would just suggest to you, though, so what God really wants you to do is just take that thing on, like a dog with a bone, okay? Take that thing on and let God do what he's trying to do in you, no matter how fearful it might be. Because God's not expecting you to be perfect in every single area of your life. We're pretty much messes, actually. Okay? But God knows the things he's really concerned about in our lives, right? And we should pay attention to those. And he knows how to communicate in our heart, in our mind, what those things are. And so I'm just wanting to encourage you as men that if you're willing to actually take that on, especially if you have other brothers with you, and you communicate what that is, if you're struggling with it, if it's one of those things that's hard to do, it's not an easy big task to do. Having brothers around you who can support you and know that you're actually trying to accomplish whatever that is, whatever that X is, might be a new job, might be making a move to some new place. It could be many things, right? It could be stopping certain bad habits, whatever it is. But if you're willing to take that one thing on, God will heal you with that. Okay, he will help you. Okay, it doesn't mean you're gonna be perfect from then on, but he will help you through that process, and he will show you what's next. And all you really need to do is do those things that he shows you. And he doesn't give you 15 things to do at once. So when I realized that, for me, I don't know about you, but when I realized that I just had to do the thing that was right in front of me, that made the job so much easier. Because at least now I can focus on it. And most men are pretty good at focusing on what has to get done when they know that has to get done. That's one of the beautiful things about guys. We love to get stuff done. We just don't always believe we can do it. But if we have God with us, and if he's the one that's initiating it, saying, I want to birth this in you, I want to change this in you, I want this thing to happen, why would we fear then? I mean, it's the God of the universe, one who's sustaining everything. He's holding together the entire universe, and he has all eternity to spend with you for eternity to help you become the best son ever. Why not? Okay, so what we're trying to encourage is men getting together with other men who are serious about becoming the men God's calling them to be and enjoying it. It can be scary at times because we have to overcome fears. We have to overcome all kinds of crap. Okay? Lots of judgments about ourselves. Okay? We're really good at judging other people, but we're also really good at judging ourselves. Okay? we can give those things up. And so in the St. Paisios Brotherhood, we do a couple of different things. Let me give you a little background on that stuff. And I'll give you a couple more little tidbits a little bit later. We started out doing something very simple. I'll just give you kind of the most basic stuff. We have every month, the first Tuesday and the third Tuesday of every month, we host a online, what we call Zoom meeting. And we bring in people from all over the Orthodox community. Father Michael Butler is a regular speaker at that. Father Hans, of course, he's about half of those meetings. He's present with it. But we've had Father Stephen there before. We've had Metropolitan Jonah. We have many people, really excellent people speaking to our men. And what we do with that is basically to encourage men that there are different ways to approach becoming a godly man, different ways to approach that issue. And so you can hear them, and you can hear how they're dealing with these things and how they're solving different problems. Like we just had a doctor of theology, Orthodox theology, named Christopher Lockwood give us a two-part series on how to deal with temptations. And it was surprisingly informative. There were a lot of things that what our assumptions about how to deal with temptations probably are not as accurate as what actual orthodoxy would teach how to solve these problems. So you have these great teachers that can help kind of unpack this stuff for us in a way that can really help. So we have those kind of meetings on a regular basis. And if you sign up for our on our website, and there's a brochure, by the way, in the back, and there's a big QR code on the back. If you go to that, you can sign up for our regular mailing, so you can get on that list. We also have in there a place where you can sign up to get into our Telegram group. We have about 600 guys are in that, maybe 700 guys are in that group. But we have many Telegram groups for different kinds of things. So those are a couple of things we do. And then we decided Father Hans had, you could tell his heart. He really is wanting to see men who are in bondage to some of these, well, PMO specifically. And these men want to be free, and they wanted help. And so Father Hans began to develop a program. I've been his assistant for that program for the last, we've done like 16 of them at least, I think, something like that.
Yeah, 15, 16 cycles. Yeah.
And we've had a lot of good men go through these programs. We've had probably that and some other programs. We've had probably about 600 men go through our program so far. Good men. These are almost entirely really good men. But we have this program that Father Hans does called ASI, Achieving Sexual Integrity. And it really helps men to begin to understand what's really going on, what's causing this, and how do you begin to detach, break the power of that over your life, okay? Doesn't mean you'll never, ever have an issue ever again in your life after 8 weeks, but it can make a huge difference. And some men are able to have it broken permanently. So that's one program we have going. That's a really very intimate program, very, very private, but it's a powerful one. We just did one last night. We found though, when we were doing that program, I'm going to kind of jump now back to an earlier program that we're involved in, and that is we discovered that in order for men to actually kind of break the power of these things, they need to take on these ascetic disciplines. These things I was telling you about that for millennia, men, righteous men have been doing for millennia, morning and evening prayer rule, but also reading of holy texts, the attendance of worship regularly, I'd add confession to that, observance of the fasts. Almost all men, Orthodox men, understand that these are good things. Very few of them have habituated these things. How many men, I'll just ask one question. I'm not going to embarrass the others. But how many men here actually do their prayer rule every day for the last year. Okay, awesome. Okay, so it's possible to see guys who are doing it, okay? If you talk to those men who are doing that regularly, it begins to change you, does it not? You begin to see the world differently. You begin to even read the prayers differently. You begin to see things that you weren't seeing before. One of the ones that for me, that helped me really early on, was I remember reading this text which says, God, open my eyes to see certain things, open my ears to hear certain things. And I started seeing things in my life that needed changing because I was open to it now. Okay? These prayers, God will illumine things in these prayers to you, these ancient prayers, the things that you need at the right time that you need them. Okay? So that's why we need to be constantly pursuing God through these prayers. It's not for God's benefit, it's for our own healing. Okay? And so we have this thing called the pledge. And so guys who sign up and come into our programs, the very first thing we ask them to do is become a pledge member. And what that means is you're going to do a morning, evening prayer rule. You're going to read the holy text. You're going to go to church regularly and confession regularly, and you're going to obey the fasts. And when we start doing that together, we find most men theoretically, again, understand that, and they like the idea, but we actually then create a program called Boot Camp. And right now, it was 4 weeks, now it's 6 weeks. It'll probably even, it may end up extending to 8 weeks coming up. But we produce this program called Boot Camp to kind of help you take on and make sure you're actually acquiring these ascetic disciplines so they actually are part of who you are. And of course, 8 weeks is not going to do it either fully, but you can begin to see your progress. And you can begin to see the difference in your life when you start doing these things. Because it does change your life. It changes, and other people around you will see it. In fact, I'll go so far as to say, like in my case, I used to think my wife was a little crazy, okay? It wasn't until I actually took this stuff deadly seriously that I actually started doing my prayer rule right. I used to do my prayer rule walking around the neighborhood. I didn't want to do it in front of my wife. I thought that was somehow more righteous, not doing it in front of her, okay? Big mistake. Once she saw that I was actually committed to doing these things every morning, every evening, reading the holy texts with her every night, reading Saints of the Day every night, she became less crazy. As a matter of fact, she became pretty damn sweet. As a matter of fact, more loving than I could imagine, okay? Totally different. I don't know what happened to her, but it worked. My point here is, guys, is that as we begin to bring order to our own souls, it affects everything else around us. Solzhenitsyn understood this, I think. And when he was in Soviet Union and he was actually in the gulags and all those things, but he started actually pursuing God in that whole process. It started changing him, and it began to change their nation. And it healed their nation, okay? It took a brave soul, and he did it. He wasn't the only one, of course, but my point is that I believe that that's what our nation needs too. Our nation needs healing, and it begins with you and me. And so what I'm trying to encourage you guys is to take on these disciplines. So we have this, like I said, this pledge, and it's powerful for those who are willing to take it on seriously. That's another issue with modern American men, because we're secular, we're mostly psychological. We don't take our word very seriously. We don't think, if I'm going to make a promise to somebody, especially to myself, it doesn't really matter. Okay? But in reality, what we say we're going to do and our willingness to struggle to make that happen is a forge. It will transform your soul if you will allow it. But you have to engage it. You cannot just pretend. You can't just say, these are nice ideas. That's not going to do the job. You have to actually do the sacrifices in your life necessary to make your promises become reality. But the good news is that that's not a bad thing. The good news is when you actually start keeping your promises, people begin to trust you. You begin to trust yourself. People in your communities and the people you work with begin to trust you more. They begin to have more respect for you because they know the things you say you're going to do, you do. Okay, and it starts with simple stuff. So that's what I'm saying right now. We're trying to help you to lay a good foundation at the Brotherhood so that you can build on that and have the kind of life that you really want to have. Okay, the life that really God wants to birth in you. So we start with the prayer rule. And of course, we hear from a lot of guys, well, yeah, I tried to do it this last week, but I was really busy. They got a million, you can add on a million excuses why they wouldn't get it done. But the reality of the matter is, any of these habits we want to create in our lives, any good habits that we're going to take on in our lives, there's going to have to be some sacrifice in order to achieve them. You're going to have to give something up. It's just a reality. And it makes sense in the economy of God and how he operates. He's waiting to see how serious are you about the transformation you say you desire. His grace will come and support you, but are you willing to sacrifice for it? I remember St. Paisios, he has this saying that's really powerful. I love it. But it really struck me the first time I heard it, and that was that if you want to pray for somebody or something, and you want it to be efficacious, particularly efficacious, you really want to see this happen, add some kind of sacrifice to it. It could be prostrations. It could be giving alms to somebody. It could be a million different ways of sacrificing something, but sacrifice something on the behalf of that other person. Like Father was saying about that young man, he was willing to sacrifice himself for the life of his brother. He meant it from his heart. God knows what you mean from your heart, and he will bless you for that. Okay? Totally consistent with what St. Paisios teaches. But what St. Paisios is teaching is just what the church has always taught. This is not unique to him, right? And so what I'm trying to say here, guys, is that we can make time, though, for prayer, and we must. We need to kind of shake out of the mindset that it's a nice optional thing to do to like, it's absolutely necessary if I'm going to be an Orthodox man. And I would say, and you're probably going to have a hard time doing these things without brothers. Brothers who love you enough to hold you accountable. And when I say hold you accountable, I'm not saying to try to shame you if you didn't do it right. What I mean is, if you say this is important to me, have them check in and say, well, did you do it or not? And if you didn't do it, what could you do next time better to make it work? Because I want to see you succeed. Not about shame. It's not about anything like that. It's all about how can I support you in actually achieving what you say is important to you, right? When we have brothers who care about us enough to actually remind us of the truth and the things that we promised, it helps a lot. That's one of my biggest problems, is I can know all these great truths, this great wisdom I've been reading in these by St. Paisios or other people, but if I forget them, they're no value. But if I have brothers who also know that these same truths, they can remind me, oh, are you forgetting something? You know, and they can help nudge me back into the right place, right? That's what we need brothers for. It's So I just want to encourage you to think about the possibility of, number one, signing up for our materials. Two, maybe become a pledge member. And then three, we have these programs we call boot camps first. So we've required now that everybody who wants to go into this ASI program first go through boot camp, because we found that as they do the aesthetic disciplines, as they learn to acquire them, that they have much greater success in the ASI program. So you do that first. And our next course, those next classes are starting in the first week of January. Actually, this January 7th and the 8th is when the next ASI course starts. But you would have to start with boot camp, so if you haven't already. So, but they're powerful programs. And after you've been graduating from these programs, if you want to, we actually have something called battle teams. And this is what we're trying to encourage in the different communities. And we have groups of 8 men around the country. Right now, they're mostly virtual, not all, but most of them are virtual. And they have these men, about 8 men in a group, trying to help support each other in pursuing the Orthodox disciplines and unique, specific to that individual, their goals and objectives in their lives, things they're trying to struggle with. Like maybe I want to be a better husband to my wife, or maybe I need a new job, or maybe I need to do whatever, some project that has to get done. And the men hold each other accountable and support them in actually making sure that gets done. And one of the benefits of that is it's not just the accountability part of it. That's nice. But the real powerful thing about it is when you bring any 8 men together, you'd be amazed at the amount of wisdom that you can actually draw from 8 men. I know it sounds hard to believe, but it's a reality. You bring 8 men together, they all have their experiences, and you will find, if you're a man struggling with a problem and you have other men around you, the amount of wisdom that can come from that collective group is pretty astounding. And I guess you're gonna have to trust me on this, but I know it's true. I'm just letting you know it's true, because it's a powerful thing, and it makes a huge difference in the lives of many of these men. A couple quick other things I wanted. So we have those programs. We are starting regional groups, by the way. So we have a beta out in Southern California. We're getting ready to launch one in Florida. But we have about between 400 and 500 men who've signed up to have regional gatherings of men. The Brotherhood is pan-Orthodox. So we have Greeks, OCA, Antiochian, Serbian, Romanian. We have everybody in these communities, and so it's really an interesting experience, because a lot of these men, when they meet other men from other communities, they'll often go and visit each other's communities, and it's really wonderful to see the friendships that develop and the respect for each other's communities. It's a good thing. It's being Orthodox more like it would be like being Orthodox in some other Orthodox nation. You're actually beginning to be more of a community. So it's a wonderful experience, and we want to encourage that. So what you'll be hearing about some of these events as well. We're going to be doing one, of course, in the Atlanta area, of course, that's coming up as well. So we have those things going on. And we will be doing a national leadership meeting too next year, back at the end of April. So those are some of the things we're doing. And I did want to give you a couple more little just teasers of things that we'd like to do, though. One of them, there's a couple phrases I like to talk about with St. Paisios, just to kind of do a little mind bender with you a little bit. St. Paisios had a saying that really resonates with a lot of the men I deal with. So I'm going to share it with you and let it kind of work on you a little bit in your head. But he said, make excuses for other people. Make excuses for everybody. Don't make excuses for yourself. And when I first heard that, that was like a, what? But as I began to take it on as a practice, and as I began to let it shift how I start making excuses for my wife, for instance, who I thought was crazy. She wasn't as crazy as I thought she was. I was probably making her crazy. But as I began to make excuses for her, I began to realize that my excuses that I was making for her or other people are probably closer to the truth than my judgments of them. Okay? And so maybe I just need to live that way. Maybe what he's saying is just a good idea. Because if I want to heal my soul and I want to be a man that can help other people around me, maybe I need to give up my judgments of all these people. And there's another secret about this. What will end up happening is you'll quit judging yourself so much. That's another little side benefit. And then one last thing I'll share with you before I'm going to close out, and that's that on a practical level. One of the things I'm trying to integrate with the Brotherhood, when the guys first become pledge members, we're working on how to best do this, is how to help the men become more thankful. One of the things about, and that's not a mistake, I mean this really intentionally, being thankful, I think, is probably one of the most fundamental things that an Orthodox man can do, is learn to be thankful. Without it, you're not thinking Orthodox. But when you become a thankful man, now you're starting to live like an Orthodox man, okay? Because if you begin to see everything as a gift from God, it will fundamentally change how you approach everything, and other people will notice that you're approaching them differently because of it. And people will begin to trust you. People will like being around you. Wives will become more calm. They'll be happier because I'm not being such a judgmental guy anymore, or whatever it is. But and practically speaking, what I would like to suggest to you guys what do, this is an experiment you can do. Whether you ever contact us or not, if you just do this, I think this would be really worth your effort. Give yourself, I'm going to say give you a week, okay? Just take this on for a week. I could say just today or tomorrow, but let's give it a week so you can get some practice at it. Write down every day 10 things that you're thankful for. Just scribble them down in writing somewhere. 10 things you're thankful for today. And then do the same thing the next day. And then say these in your prayers when you're doing it. We thank God for them. Okay? I guarantee you, if you start doing this, how you see the world, how you're going to see other people around you, and how you begin to see yourself is going to change. Because you're going to discover that God is with you. You're not alone. And so I just want to encourage you to try this. You don't have to believe it's true. Try it. But I know it's going to work because I've seen it happen over and over and over again. Whenever the men are willing to give up their self-judgment and they're thinking that they know more than everybody else, that they're going to actually think that maybe God is concerned about them and will try it, it will change those men. And so I'd like to encourage you to do that. Finally, we also had obviously t-shirts, lots of them. So if you want a t-shirt, you're welcome to come back there and pick one up. But we also have packs of 10 of these little brochures. If you like the things we're talking about, I'd take one, take it to your priest, let him look at it, see if he likes it. If your priest blesses it, then you can use it in your church. But do talk to your priest. So everything we do in the Brotherhood is to support the local priest. So any advice we give any of our men in any of our programs, any of the advice we give, if the priest gives some different counter advice, listen to your priest. We're just trying to help the priest. That's all. And the priest will know you better than we do, even if we're getting together every yes.
And you need the priest's blessing to join any of the programs.
Yes, and that's also true. We ask you to have your priest's blessing to join our stuff anyhow. So that's a really important thing, because we're not competing with our churches. We're trying to help bring support to it. There's a real great need in our world today for laymen to rise up. Our priests are overworked, all of them. And they need men who they can trust, they can actually kind of let them take on different tasks, like the types of things we're talking about here. And so, but to be worthy of that kind of trust, you have to be a man who keeps his promises and is really pursuing God and doing the right things, right? And so that's kind of obvious. And so that doesn't mean you're going to be perfect right now. None of us are perfect. Your priest isn't perfect, probably. He'd probably admit that to him as well. But he sees that you're actually really seriously seeking to take on these ascetic disciplines and to be a better husband, better supporter of your community, whatever it is that your role is in your church. They'll appreciate it. I think most of them will appreciate it. And if they have questions, if these brochures don't give enough answers, tell them they can always call us too. Father would be happy to talk to them. I'll be happy to talk to them. If they have more detailed questions, that's pretty normal. And so, because we purposely not really tried to promote ourselves a lot. We were working on getting a real clear understanding of what the scope of our work was going to be before we tried to do that. And this is one of the few times we've actually been out talking publicly about this stuff. But I think we're getting ready for that. I don't know if you have any questions. Father Hans and I think Father Michael left. But do you have any questions? Anybody have a question? Yes.
The boot camp, is that done online?
It's online, yes. So you can be anywhere. Actually, we have, like in this new session, we actually have an Orthodox Jew in our boot camp right now.
You guys a convert.
Yeah. Well, no. This one's not a convert. We have two Orthodox Jews right now in process.
One who lives in Israel.
One who lives he's in the ASI program.
Yeah.
We'll let people come in, and let me give you some context on that, because you probably need to understand that. Our programs are all Orthodox. Everything we do is Orthodox. But if a man wants to and is willing to take on the Orthodox disciplines and operate in our context, sure, come. They almost always convert. I don't know of one that hasn't actually. So, so we don't worry about it. We have to make a few exceptions about how do you do the confession thing and all that. We have to work out a few things like that. But you have to go to church. We're going to want you to go to church regularly. And on a practical level, we don't want our men to try and do too much, honestly, as well. One of the things we actually, if you haven't done a regular prayer rule, talk to your priest and ask for a suggestion. But generally, our advice is when you're first starting to do it, keep it simple, fairly short. Don't try and do a 30-minute prayer rule when starting out. The Trisagion prayers, the Lord's Prayer, maybe St. Basil's. There's a few other things you could do in there. Let your priest give you some direction, but you want to habituate it more than anything else at the beginning. And that's true about all these things we're talking about. We want you to actually have new habits that you developed that will help you. By the way, we have a couple guys here that have actually been through our programs. You guys want to say anything? You can.
Well,
There's a microphone. You could actually just.
Sure.
We have a few of them here.
I don't want to interfere with the one with the recording on it too much. Yes,
Oh, there you go.
what you said about coordinating with the parish priest is very true. And there's this, and tell me if I have this right, but even in boot camp, there might be, as you said, asking for the blessing, there might be some tailoring of the prayer rule that they would otherwise give you for the purpose of, hey, I'm asking for your blessing to do this, and it, so it might be more, closer to the default Orthodox rule than it would be for you otherwise for the purposes of the boot camp, or but then in general it's a balance of what is individualized between you and your spiritual father, and then keeping that in a very deliberate way. And what I find about it is that it's a reality check, and it's a group of guys that are giving each other the courage and going on the journey together of facing these reality checks together. It's measuring without making the measurement the sort of quality or the point.
Right. What in other words, what he's saying is, we have something in our programs called progress trackers. Okay. And so what we'll do is we'll say, you said you want to do X, Y, and Z. Well, how are you doing it? And we'll ask how you're doing each day of a week, for instance. Not to win a brownie point. Nobody's going to win any brownie points in our programs. But just so you can see for yourself what you actually value, what you actually think is important. Okay. And so that's why we do that. And so it really can be an awakening for a lot of guys to all of a sudden realize, I thought I was doing a regular prayer rule, but in reality, I hardly ever do it. And that can be a shock to you, because all of a sudden you don't want to believe that. Things like that. So it's just helpful for you to, before you can change, you have to realize you need to change. So that's the value of that. Did you want to say anything?
Sure. Yeah. Careful with the small microphone attached to the cord.
Or you can just point it up to you or whatever.
Hello?
Hello? Yeah, there we go. It's okay.
Yeah, so I think I heard about it first from a monk, actually. You recommended that I look into it. At first, I went to the website, and at first I was like, oh, we're doing all these disciplines, and I was like, oh, it's very interesting. And I was a little hesitant at first. It was like, I'm not up to that level yet. So I was like, I gotta get there first, which is not true. You don't need to do that. So a lot of people who join the boot camp just kind of jump in and are like at zero, like they don't have any of the discipline.
Right.
Very beginner. And even coming into it, it showed me a lot of like I really lacked consistency. And by the end of the first boot camp session, I was like almost sad it was over. I was like, I really liked the routine it added to my life, and you're given did you mention the accountability partner?
No, I didn't. Go ahead, tell them about it.
So when you join the boot camp, you're given a partner which you call every single day, like an actual phone call, not a text, not a voice message, actual phone call. You coordinate and you set up a time each day, and that's tracked through the progress tracker. So, and what it does is it creates this like trust-filled relationship, because it's like a short conversation each day, but it oftentimes turns into maybe a longer one, because a lot of guys in there pretty like-minded, and you end up sharing like useful tips or give solutions if guys got a problem. It's very beneficial. So by the end of it all, I was like, oh man, I really want to do it again. And you suggested I do it again as well. So I was like, yeah, I'll do the boot camp again. And there are some people who do that. They just sign up over and over again.
Well, we're trying to find different ways. Ideally, we'd like the guys to get into a battle team because that will help really build real strong relationships. But if you're not able to get into a slot at the time, if we don't have one that's open, that's ready to go. So a lot of guys will cycle through a boot camp with us and help the other guys, because a lot of the guys who come in, we have some people who are experienced, of course. We have other guys who are not much of any experience, or maybe even they're inquirers, you know. So we have a long ways to go. So those guys like Stu, he can help those kind of guys as they're going through the process, right? So that's an example of it. I just want to thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So anyhow, any last questions? Otherwise, I know we're kind of late already, so I don't want to belabor it. But if you do like what you're hearing here, and if you think your church would like it, please, I'd like to walk away with none of these. So if you want to take one of these home, please do so. And if you like a t-shirt, we got them available. We try to give them as cheap as possible for you. So hopefully, you know, I think they look pretty nice. Anyhow, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.